Sorry, these indicators include lower income inequality, having less residential segregation by race, having lower barriers to regional governance, and having less of a divide in poverty rates between cities and suburbs. There was also a study by some folks at Brookings on smaller regions that found a positive relationship between quality of life investments like schools and transportation options and having a better employment and population growth. But as we all know, there are still barriers to regional equity. Low and moderate income people make up a greater share of workers in professions with fewer options for hybrid or remote work and the benefits that these jobs bring. And we know that cities often encourage job creation without allowing enough housing to be built for people at all income levels or dedicating adequate resources to affordable housing. Housing and job markets exist at a regional level, and decisions made in one jurisdiction affect outcomes in the whole region. And many larger cities and metros lack housing that people in lower wage jobs can afford. LA. Wages are not meeting the cost of housing near jobs for low and moderate income workers. And these workers, as you all know, face increasingly steep trade-offs between long commutes and affordable homes. So the research that we did. So, given this fact that poverty has suburbanized. What does that mean? Well, the number of people with incomes that are below the federal poverty line living in suburbs actually surpassed the number who live in big cities during the 2000s. While at the same time, poverty rates have still remained high in many big cities. So we wanted to know, what does suburban poverty look like in different regions, and what can it tell us about regional equity? So, in for oh, the meeting is being live streamed. Great. The difference in poverty rates across different cities and towns is the kind of indicator that we use here. It's not the only indicator, but it's the one we're using for this discussion to talk about regional equity. And this whole picture that we create by looking at these differences in poverty rates has implications for things like regional governance and local services and capacity in the community development field to provide services to low and moderate income communities and communities of color. So, specifically, we asked, what is the distribution of suburban poverty by geography or jurisdiction type in a metropolitan region? And within that, what is the distribution of suburban poverty within each incorporated suburban geography? So, spoiler alert. Uh, the no, the number of low and moderate and low income people living in different suburbs is not growing at the same rate. So what we did was we analyzed the five largest metro areas in each census region. And then we also additionally looked at some more metro areas here in the Western US where the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco is located. We expected to find some variation in the jurisdictional geography of the suburbanization of poverty across the country, but we weren't quite sure what that would look like. So just some terms, when we talk about jurisdiction type, we're talking about the largest city in a metropolitan statistical area, the other principal cities that the census uses, um, and then we make this distinction between a large suburb and a small suburb. And that's depending on whether they have more than 50,000 people to be a large suburb, because that's the threshold at which a jurisdiction gets direct access to federal block grant funding, such as CDBG. And then we have unincorporated areas, which includes named census designated places as well as other populations in unincorporated county areas. What did we find? So we found that some suburbs have seen substantially more growth in poverty than others. In many places, higher and lower income people are increasingly living in different suburbs. And this unevenness signals differences in opportunity that present challenges for regional equity. And in particular, in metro areas that are served by the San Francisco Fed in the Western US, poverty rates have grown primarily in large suburbs with populations over 50,000 people. And this matters because, in comparison to larger cities, these large suburbs often lack infrastructure and resources needed to address poverty. So, with some exceptions, of course, the community development institutions and funding sources that serve low and moderate income communities and communities of color have been slower to follow the increase in suburban poverty. This is partly due to just institutional inertia. Nonprofits and philanthropy tend to work where they already have roots and they have a base of operations, which historically has been in big cities. And it's also in part due to the challenges in identifying and reaching low income populations in suburbs where they are more spread out and poverty looks a little bit different than what folks traditionally think of in bigger cities. However, sort of on the bright side here, large suburbs do have direct access to certain federal funding sources, such as community development block grants. Just for comparison, um, as I mentioned in the Pacific West, the largest share and most of the growth in suburban poverty was in large suburbs. In the Mountain West, there was some growth in poverty in large suburbs, but the greatest share of people experiencing poverty is still in the largest cities. So, in that sense, like poverty hasn't actually suburbanized in larger metros in the Mountain West. And for comparison, in the Midwest, the largest growth and share of metro area population experiencing poverty was in small suburbs. These are the Ferguson, Missouris of the world, places that have an increasing reliance on fines and fees because they lack the budget because they have very low income populations and very small populations. In the Northeast, the largest growth in population experiencing poverty was in unincorporated areas, but there was growth in all suburbs. And there was this suburbanization of poverty in the sense that when you combine small and large suburbs as a share, that exceeds the largest city. And in the South, the largest growth and share of people experiencing poverty, so again, poverty did suburbanize in the South, was in unincorporated areas. This was more than large and small suburbs combined, and the best example is suburban Atlanta, where you have had large growths in low income populations in unincorporated areas, as well as a rash of incorporations where wealthier suburban populations that were previously unincorporated have incorporated and, in that sense, walled themselves off in terms of resources. So, what does this look like in the Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario metro area? So, the share of people experiencing poverty living in large suburbs increased in the Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario, California metro area. And I think can I hide this? Haha. Okay. Um, so just to sit with this for a moment, you can see that when you take the dotted line at the top, when you take all incorporated suburban places together, all suburban cities, whether they're above or below that 50,000 threshold, that is clearly the largest share. And then when you break out large and small, the yellow line, large suburbs, are still by far um, the largest share. And you've seen moderate decreases in the share um, of people experiencing poverty in in other geography types in the region. So, including unincorporated areas, small suburbs. other principal cities and in the largest city. So again, the largest city would be Riverside, and other principal cities would be San Bernardino and Ontario. And this is a good place to know that this is not poverty rates going down in any of those, places necessarily. It's just, as you have population growth, what proportion of the populations experiencing poverty are living in these different geographies. So this is pretty typical for the Western US. And also, in terms of the racial demographics and how those have changed in these different geographies, the Black and Hispanic populations grew as a proportion of all Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario metro area geographies, but the growth and as well as the proportion of racial and ethnic groups were more similar across geographies in the Riverside metro area than in other metro areas. So, just for example, like another other metro areas, you might have seen more growth in the population of different racial and ethnic groups in one type of geography, or you might see a disproportionate share in a particular geography in the Riverside metro area. Those racial demographics stayed pretty proportional, and the growth was pretty proportional across geographies. So this is not meant to be a test of your vision. This is just meant to give you a sense of what is in the report that you can check out later. And I'm going to summarize for you in a more easily visible form. But just to give you a sense, this is an ordered list of all of the places in the Riverside metro area, ranked by poverty rate from highest to lowest. And it shows you what the change in the poverty rate has been since 1990, as well as what the change in population has been. So, whether they've had a large amount of population growth or not. And then the racial and ethnic demographics that are currently in that area, as well as this place type that we've been talking about, this jurisdiction type. It tells you whether it is, um, in this sense, a small suburb or a large suburb, or a census designated place, which is an unincorporated place. So there's the rest of the list. And then we also, again, this is not meant to be a test of your vision and or memory of what, although you could use it as a test of your memory of what all the places are in the metro area. This is meant to be a visualization of um, what the actual poverty rate is currently. So the color ramp, if you will, the kind of heat map. The darker green is a higher poverty rate, and then the kind of first set of kind of patterns in the legend tells you what type of geography is. So if you want to see all of the large suburbs at once, you can kind of visualize where those are. And then the kind of slash marks tell you if a place had a poverty rate that exceeded the metro area by a large amount. We set that threshold sort of arbitrarily, but based on the literature, at 5% when at the beginning of the study in 1990, or whether it now has a poverty rate that exceeds the region by 5%, or whether it has always or did and continues to have a poverty rate that exceeds the region. So this is a visualization of that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then this is a visualization of the change in poverty rate. So the darker the green, the greater the increase in poverty rate over the study period, and the darker the purple, going the other direction, is the greater the decrease in poverty rate. And the kind of quick takeaway from this is, again, that point we were talking about earlier of not all suburban places or not all places within the metro area have experienced the same increase or decrease in poverty rates. There are some places that have become more poor than other places. And so, when we think about what does economic opportunity mean in the region, folks are not necessarily moving to the same places based on income or becoming poorer in place at the same rate. So to pull out some points from these visualizations that are in the report, the small suburbs that are under 50,000 but had more than 10,000 people and also had poverty rates that were 8 or more points above the Riverside metro area were Barstow, Desert Hot Springs, and Adelanto. And this is in 2018. There was an unincorporated suburb that had 8 or more points above the metro poverty rate, and that's Muscoy. Um, and the other principal city, San Bernardino, also had a poverty rate that was much higher than the metro area, which is unusual for other metro areas throughout the study. Mostly the kind of second and or third largest city in the metro area was not much more poor than the region. And then the small suburbs of Coachella and Banning um, also had poverty rates that were around 5 to 8 points higher than the rest of the metro area. So the places that had a population of at least 10,000 that had poverty rates that were at least 5 points above the metro area in 2018 that did not in 1990. So that means they grew to being more poor than the rest of the region, whereas they were not more poor previously. Were, as you can see, mostly large suburbs, but also a small suburb and a CDP. Um, and then the places that had at least 10,000 people and had a poverty rate 5 or more points above the metro area, both comparison years in the study, were mostly small suburbs as well as the city of San Bernardino. Okay, so what do we make of all of this? Well, I would argue that these patterns of poverty growth in suburban areas demonstrate the unevenness of the suburbanization of poverty. There are new concentrations of poverty in more affordable suburban jurisdictions, and these can create challenges for equity and for community development work. And again, the responsibility of providing equitable access to housing and transportation to support the regional economy is not shared evenly across jurisdictions, despite the shared benefits. Um, we think these findings also shed light on governance opportunities. Regional organizations seeking to coordinate efforts could consider how many jurisdictions there are with low income populations and what resources they currently have access to based on their size and incorporation status. Currently, as we mentioned before, unincorporated areas compete with one another and with small suburbs for federal community development funding within their county, which I'm sure you know better than I. And unincorporated areas, it's worth pointing out, often lack the transportation options of larger jurisdictions that help low and moderate income populations access jobs and services. And of course, they do not have a city government that can apply directly for grants and technical assistance from the state and federal government. So that coordination piece and that regional governance piece across sectors is especially important for them. Okay, so what are some promising models and practices? And then in a minute, I want to hear from you, your ideas here. Um, So, regional collaboration, as I mentioned, among the public, private, and nonprofit sectors can help ensure equitable access to healthy and resilient communities by investing in housing, transportation, and built environment infrastructure. So, for example, regional governments or councils of government can provide data, apply for grants, convene regional actors. One example, the San Joaquin Valley COG received a state regional early action planning grant for housing planning. And I would love to hear an update, but I'm aware from my own past research of Western Riverside COG's work helping individual jurisdictions prepare climate action plans and emissions inventories and work like that. Other promising practices obviously include public transit, but also bike and pedestrian facilities, parks, and street trees, which can help with climate resilience, particularly in more affordable suburbs where some of these facilities might be lacking. Thinking about transportation, there's also first mile, last mile improvements to how people access transit stations and how they reach their destination from a transit station, which helps increase access to jobs. So, improving infrastructure for walking, biking, scooters, or different types of vehicle transportation, such as green ride sharing. There's an example in the Central Valley of the Green Ride Share program that is improving access to medical care and other services in lower density suburban and rural areas where that is probably your best bet for getting older or disabled folks to medical appointments. There's also the strategy around producing and preserving subsidized affordable housing, so below market rate housing, as well as tenant protections, which can help reduce the potential for other housing investments to spur residential displacement. One example of a finance mechanism for this is the new Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, which is housed at Bay Area Metro, aka MTC ABAG. Um, that is going to be helping kickstart affordable housing across the region. So, I would love to hear what this reminds you of, what ideas it sparks, what collaborations are going on in your area. I heard Carla say at the top you are planning to use this data. I would love to hear how and how future research might be helpful, kind of iterating off of what you're hearing and what you're doing. And I will just promo a future research project that I am working on is mapping based on these type of geographies, where is nonprofit spending going by place, by county, by metro area. And I know that you can have a whole metro area that's look overlooked by philanthropy as well as places within that. So I highly recommend to keep up to date on all of that you sign up for our email list. I promise our newsletters only go out like quarterly or something, so it's not that much spam. And again, you can get all of the data as well as a lot of the discussion that informed this talk in blog form from our website. And feel free to reach out and or follow me. So with that, I will turn the screen back over to Carla and I will open it up to questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We are so lucky that there's somebody that cares to do research at this level on poverty. For those of us that are passionate about creating a strong economy where we can move people from poverty into middle class and stable homes, this is the starting point, understanding the problem, creating solutions locally, having discussions about how we can accomplish this. So we'll be using your research, well, first, just to inform our own work. Each one of us that sits in this commission has some type of activity where they're trying to, move people into economic prosperity. And we are also at the Community Action Commission and the agency, we're undergoing our strategic plan. So this is perfect information to give us an idea of how to strategize better, how to focus our attention where we can leverage the challenges that we have. But I think you also pointed to some opportunities that are, hope for us to continue moving forward in the future. So I really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to hear your research and to have you here for questions or comments. So if our commissioners would please interact with us and give us a reaction of what they heard, is this something that resonates with the challenges that you're experiencing? Have you felt this? You are in some of these cities that were mentioned. Have you felt it? What are the boots on the ground and the ears and the eyes of the community saying to you that we could discuss? So it's open to whoever would like to take the first comments or questions.
I thank you so much for the presentation. It's something that, to be honest, as a grassroots organizer, we see on the ground and we know this firsthand, but it's important to have the research to back up. So data is so important to move policies or systems. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Sure thing. Thank you for attending.
For questions from commissioners? Questions. So while others are thinking about their questions, how are other regions when you are presenting this information? I'm very interested in knowing, for example, how are the cities seeing the exodus of people into the suburbs? Is it something that they are talking about? Is it a concern of theirs that people are living in big numbers? And have you seen regional collaborations where people that are moving from one place to another have that sort of like a handoff where they know how to where to move? How are other areas receiving this information?
Yeah. Well, I think, the closest parallel that you're probably also aware of is here in the Bay Area, where we also have extreme housing pressures near job centers, both for information workers and for service workers. And it's kind of sad and not a good thing that many of our nurses and teachers and police officers commute in from at least the kind of far edges of the Bay Area, but also from across regional lines. So it's sort of like this relationship of the LA Metro to the Riverside Metro. The Central Valley has become our bedroom community, and you have like Stanford Hospital running a bus from Stockton in the morning for their workers. All the tech companies running buses for their janitors from Tracy in the morning, before dawn. And um, in terms of what they're doing about it here, I think there's the a lot of work at the state level, a lot of grants that folks can apply to in whether it's in the housing category like ASIC or in the climate category like TCC. That's the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities and the Transformative Climate Communities. And I mentioned another one in the talk for housing, the LEAP grant. Um, I think the state is taking more notice. So, and it's both the grant making and it's also you're probably aware that HCD is doing a lot more enforcement of their RENA requirements. And I think it's forcing the job centers to build, but it's also recognizing that there's a vicious cycle of under-resourced places not having the ability to apply for things because they don't have the local staff capacity. Um, and I think there are, some efforts like the Greenlining Institute that are based here in Oakland but work nationally. They have been the TA provider for a lot of communities like Stockton um, that received the TCC grant, and I think they have been making the case successfully that when the state gives out grants, they should do more to, have a separate cohort or provide TA in advance or have a planning grant for places that don't have all of that, 50 people on their staff out the gate. And I think it's, also I've been, on my kind of next adventure interviewing nonprofits and their funders. I think there's a growing recognition in kind of the philanthropy space, and in the CD finance space that there needs to be more attention on lower resource places. And I think, maybe some of you are even aware, like LISC, the CDFI, they were central to kind of creating a network of places that were providing pandemic relief and rental assistance. And we're now thinking with them on ways to, help continue those types of networks where instead of having these constant boom bust cycles of, there's some federal money coming down, we all scramble, we develop these great relationships, and then it just kind of disappears and you're left kind of in the same position, or worse, having to give back your rent relief even though there's need in your area because you couldn't get it out the door fast enough. So that's going to certainly be an area, both of those things, looking at how to sustain those networks and how to encourage philanthropy to take that chance on places where there isn't already an established kind of grassroots community, and of nonprofit service providers, or it's just as maybe just not as robust of one as where they're used to working. So I would love to hear others' thoughts on how you all are. Obviously, you have this group, and are doing, I'm sure, lots of work to kind of build your infrastructure. So
I would like to hear from the public commissioners, from the public sector commissioners, if you are experiencing that challenge that Lizzie is finding through her research of not being able to apply for funding. And then I would also like to hear from the private sector commissioners if they are also experiencing in the not most of the private sectors we have here. I think all of them are nonprofits. Are you experiencing the inability to either fundraise or get the funds out of of your your chart? So I don't know if anybody can take on some of those questions. Give us some insight into how you are experiencing this from the public sector. Yes.
From the city of Hemet, we don't have grant writers. And so when it comes to, like, for example, I came from the city of Oceanside, and the buses ran like every 15 minutes. So you didn't really have to worry about what time the bus came. You just walked out there, and and sometimes the bus was coming, but you knew you didn't have to wait too long. Here in the city of Hemet, it's like 2 hours between each, almost an hour and a half between each. So when I was riding the bus to Temecula to go to work, it was very difficult where I'd have to be either late to work or show up like 2 hours early and just be waiting around, something like that. Or my shift would end after the buses would end. And so it was hard to get in and out of the city of Hemet towards Temecula, just to go to work. And so I could see what she's saying about how some of these communities like Hemet don't have, or they're lacking in some of those resources as far as transportation is concerned. And then if we're lacking in transportation and people can't get to a decent job, then then we'll see more poverty because they don't have the vehicles, they don't have, it kind of goes along with a lot of the things I saw as she was doing her presentation. Very informative presentation, but we don't even have the staff right now to go after government grants or going after grants because either our staff right now is inundated with whatever they're doing. They're too busy with whatever they're doing right now to step aside and create those programs or those shovel ready projects that if we did go after a grant, that we would be ready. So it's like we're always behind the times of, okay, we found a grant, but we have to go after it. But the grants, it's due in like a month, and there's not enough time for the staff to set aside their daily duties to really put it to really fill out the paperwork to get everything going. And then the city suffers more because I keep hearing all the time there's money out there for all kinds of things. Cities just have to apply for it, but for whatever reason we're having a hard time finding grant writers. We're having a hard time with fundraising, just like somebody said in the chat, and it's just difficult. And then when we do, sometimes the programs that could help our constituents don't match up with the grants that are even being put out there, and so then there's that barrier as well. And so there's lots of barriers that I could just keep going on and on about him. But if I could get a team of grant writers in our city just to focus on getting money, and then have our staff, our department heads have the shovel ready projects, and some nonprofit, just someone on standby waiting to implement or use the money or however so the program works, all that comes together. But we're just, as far as like making all those things happen, it's very overwhelming, frustrating. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm trying to do the best I can for my city right now while I'm serving on council. And it's very frustrating because I see the money out there. I hear what she's talking about, but just the people meeting up, everything coming together seamlessly so that we can make these things happen. There's just a lot of barriers and it gets a little frustrating.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that perspective, and that really resonates with me. This idea that it's hard to even find grant writers, and uh, I think that's something that I've heard in our work on climate resilience. I think pretty much every city has a climate action plan now, but um, being able to apply for funding and having someone to help you do that is really challenging. So, why we've been working with a group of cities in Washington State through their state Department of Public Health and talking about those issues. Um, and, I don't think I have a good answer of whether is it just, do we need to build better consultant networks or make those introductions? Or is it kind of more structural than that? So,
I see Dr. Aaliyah Rodriguez stand up. Dr. Aaliyah, you're muted. You can take the floor.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me okay, Carla? Okay, I know you called on the public sector first, but I just wanted to talk on behalf of the private sector. I do have a unique position as having worked in public policy and local government agencies for several years before coming over to the nonprofit sector. But I feel like this is all just very contributory to just a wicked problem. There is a lot of money, yes, like some of my peers have said before, there's a lot of quote unquote money out there, but getting access to it and operationalizing it to meet local objectives is always very difficult. For example, as a nonprofit, we have applied to the CDBG grant multiple times, but we get denied because that money is getting redirected for homeless issues. Whereas my agency, specifically, we're trying to get to the root of the problem, which is domestic violence and domestic violence prevention, because that's a big contributor to women and children that are homeless, right? But yet we can't get some of the funding sometimes because it's going to these bigger efforts, these bigger agendas out there that we're really never actually getting to the root of the problem, which ties right into poverty and the wealth gap. And I mean, I can go on for a very long time about all these different kinds of issues. But I think to Lizzie's point, after listening to her presentation and reviewing her presentation, I would personally need some time to just marinate on that. But I feel like the fundraising component, grant writing component is very difficult and challenging in the nonprofit sector too, because things are getting redirected for what seems like other priorities, at least from my perspective. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop doing the work, even if it means we're just helping a few people at a time. But truly getting to the root of low income and moderate income populations, it does take public-private partnerships in order to make those things happen. And I don't always know if cities are that ready and willing to put the work in to partner with nonprofit organizations or make those partnerships happen to really, change the trajectory of our communities. And I think it's kind of an all hands on deck approach and making sure all programs are kind of intersected in order to start tackling the key issues as it relates to poverty in our community. So just some of my outside thoughts, Carla and Izzy and you guys, but those are just some outside thoughts. But yes, funding and fundraising, especially post-COVID for a nonprofit organization, a lot of funding went down. People retired, moved out of state. So funding has gone down quite a bit. And so, and then if we start looking at funds, are they local funds, state funds, or federal funds? The higher you go, the more complicated those projects can be executable when you have, retention issues with staffing. Like someone said earlier, you don't always have people to manage and administer those kinds of funding in those programs. So again, wicked problem.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And, what's interesting from where I sit as a researcher, there is not a lot of transparency in community development block grant funding. And I recognize that as an applicant, I guess, or as a small nonprofit or a service provider, that it's a little bit of a black box. It's kind of a black box to me too, um, because if you're in a small city, less than 50,000, or if you are in an unincorporated area, you are kind of at the whim of the county. Um, and then, yeah, whatever the politics are within those individual cities, and then the reporting requirements on where that money actually goes is, it's like a PDF buried on some website, and you have to go to 1,000 websites to find out what's going on. So it's a little bit hard for us um, to track. But you know, I think, one of the maybe, things that could help bridge this kind of chicken and egg problem of grant writing capacity and, funding, or just uh, getting philanthropy to take a chance on more areas without as established an infrastructure. There's an example that we've written about before. Excuse me, called, some of you might be familiar with the Sierra Health Foundation. They're out of Sacramento, but they work in the San Joaquin Valley. Um, and my colleague Jessica, who's on the line, knows their consultant, who's actually Southern California based, Lisa Richter. And we had her speak at our kind of national community development conference, the National Interagency Community Reinvestment Conference that we host every 2 years. Earlier this year, I'm seeing Malcolm nodding his head. Hopefully, a few of you come to NICRC. And we actually just published a blog kind of summarizing what she said and what others said. And I can share that through Jessica. But they basically, they have a community kind of leadership group, if you will, that helps set priorities for a grant making process that then, helps build the infrastructure so that then you can have both grants and community development finance coming in, which is ultimately, going to be a larger scale than just grant making, and kind of, bringing together, I guess, those legs of the stool of like priority setting, like you were saying, running into that wall of, well, they're focused on homelessness, we're focused on domestic violence and the root causes. With kind of the grant making that built up the capacity to then be ready for larger scale philanthropy, CD finance, larger grants. So.
And I would like to suggest that, as we start working together closer, I love the idea of public-private partnerships. I've heard a couple of people here in the county say that we cannot do this alone as government. And I also know that nonprofits cannot do it alone without us. It seems that COVID, pandemic really started to show how interdependent we are, how connected we are, how much we can do together. But the most important piece that I think we need to concentrate as community action partnership is to make sure that public and private are always in tandem and in aligned and in support and in partnership. with community. So, that public-private community partnership really are the ones that help the public and private have a strategy that really makes a difference. And that's why our tripartite board that has low-income voices, from the commissioners, really help that build that public-private community partnership in a way where we can start understanding our frustrations, not having regulators, but this is the beginning, understanding where the solution could come. And if it's applying for funds, if it's creating strategies, if it's coalescing and creating collective fundraising, well, we can start talking about that. And that's the reason why we have a commission that, has people who are passionate and are looking for solutions. And we are having this conversation here on an evening. Instead of going home, we are here volunteering our time to think through how to make our communities and neighborhoods better. But it all starts with our residents. So I wanted to ask the residents, the low-income representatives on the commission, how is this conversation sounding to you? Is it something that you see in your communities? Anybody can go.
Carla, this is Maurice. I'm very thankful for the information that she's provided. And now where we are, we're at the farthest end of the county, right at the Arizona border. And I noticed from the maps how green our areas were for poverty. And I really appreciate the fact that the information I'm going to take from this will help me figure out what we can do in Blythe, where there is very few jobs and a very large unemployment rate.
Thank you.
That
I
is,
appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely too. Other comments from other commissioners?
Carla, it's Annette. I'm in Hemet with Malcolm, and housing is my passion here. And, when I looked at the maps that she showed and just talked about the ideas of doing some low income housing and things of that nature, that would absolutely be something that we really need to focus on in this community. We have a really high rate of homelessness. And so trying to get people in housing, I've talked to quite a few people that have Section 8 housing and they can't find housing in this community at all. So those are things, like you said, public and private coming together. We're going to really have to work on that so that we can look at the poverty level and getting people in sufficient housing.
Yeah, thank you for that, Annette. And I think when folks talk about some of the newer opportunities that are out there based on state law around duplexes, 4 units on a lot splits, ADUs, all of those opportunities, I think they get talked about more in, large urban areas, like a lot of focus on LA, but not on a place like Riverside where folks have large lots, and these are not some of these are going to be opportunities for developers, like the brand new law that just got signed about building more mixed use housing by right on commercial corridors, commercial properties, like dead mall revamps, all of that, going up a few stories in places where you just have, 1-story strip malls and things like that. But also, an area of my research is looking at how these are, wealth building opportunities. And I think, when we talk about, density and multifamily, it's not just that we only talk about urban areas, but we only think about it in terms of like the housing type, like, oh, we just need more condos or something. But like, it's also that we need to make it easier for multi-generational or non-traditional kind of family arrangements to access financing to build these. Because, right now it's, if you want to build a duplex or an ADU, that's an opportunity for people who have cash or who have good credit or just whatever access to capital. But how can, I'm interested in how we can actually make these wealth building opportunities for low income people who might, otherwise not be able to afford a house they inherited, or, lack an income source into their retirement, that sort of thing. So just want to put that out there too.
Well, unfortunately, we ran out of time. We have to continue our meeting. Lizzie, thank you so much for your presentation. Now you are a partner officially, and you can't get rid of us because we're going to need more data.
That's great. And yeah, I would just leave you with, I'm happy to, please, feel free to reach out if you want to chew on anything as you guys go along with developing your strategy, using this data and other data. My colleague, Jessica Coria, is a really great point of contact. And, to the extent that we can use the tools that we have in, research and data, and also convening and helping you connect with folks who are maybe outside of your sector or whatever you haven't had a chance to connect with, who might be partners who you're looking for. We can help facilitate that, and also sharing out your stories of what is working in your area. So please report back to us, and as I am doing more research in your area on nonprofit spending, I will be reaching out through Jessica. So thank you so much, and I will share my slides, and take care.
Thank you, Lizzie. And so for anybody that wants to stay in touch with the Federal Reserve Bank, Jessica Correa has just put her information and on the chat. You can contact her, and she's been great. Ever since I met her, we've done great collaborations, and she brings experts like Lizzie to really help us hone into some of the things that keep us thinking all the time, but the solutions we want to bring to our community. So thank you very much again for being here, and we're going to continue our meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to jump. First, I need to find my screen. We're going to jump into the director's report. I hope that you're able to see my screen. Yes. Okay. And not all my notes, right? All right. So my director report is quite short this time. We have today October, and it's the weatherization month, and we received a Board of Supervisors proclamation. So I wanted to invite Wayne Harris to the floor just to share a little bit about the program that he runs, which is weatherization, and how important this month and day are for our organization. So Wayne, please join us.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Carla. So every year in October is Energy Awareness Month, and October 30th is Weatherization Day. So the Board of Supervisors issues the proclamation to bring awareness to the benefits of weatherization programs, such as the program that Community Action Partnership has been running for over 40 years. And we join over 1,000 like-minded community action agencies across the United States in celebrating the benefits and impact of weatherization programs to improve resiliency in the community and to help improve the health and safety of low-income households. I wanted to bring this to your attention for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure you know that every year there is such a thing as a weatherization day and an energy awareness month. And the second one is to plant the seed for next year. We're sort of still in the recovery mode for the pandemic and didn't have enough sort of energy and resources to do a full-blown weatherization day event or an energy awareness event, but we hope to next year, and we would like, obviously, to make sure that this is an organized event with the commission, and then hopefully we bring these types of activities and awareness to your community and the people that you serve. So that's pretty cool, and I look forward to next year so we can all do this together. Thank you.
So Wayne, could you just share with the commissioners that may not know exactly what weatherization means, what it means, and how it impacts people, how we prioritize, and who are the people that receive the help, and then also some of the limitations around it?
Of course, yeah. So weatherization is a general term that just means improving the energy efficiency of a household, and it's improved a variety of ways. It's through appliances or structural improvements, and in areas that you wouldn't actually think that would apply. So think of not just the actual energy, but water conservation is also a weatherization measure. So like aerators or low flow toilets, those types of things improve the energy efficiency of a home as well. And so we also do health and safety issues like mold mitigation, CO monitors, which are actually very important. I don't know if you heard recently, we had in the United States, we had a whole daycare that was had to be emergency evacuated because there was excessive carbon monoxide inside the daycare unit. And so it's something that you can't tell, and you need a monitor. And so we install monitors in residences. And the way people apply for this is through the LIHEAP program. The LIHEAP program is the Low Income Household Energy Assistance Program. And so we apply, it's an income-based program. And once we determine that you're eligible, then we actually do a home assessment. When we assess your home, we determine what measures would be suitable for your home to increase the energy efficiency and the health and safety of your home. And then we use subcontractors that we have retained through an RFP process. And they are on contract with County of Riverside Community Action Partnership. And when we actually write work orders, they go out to the residents, perform the work, we come behind them, inspect the work, and then we pay the subcontractor for the work that's done in the resident's home. And I want to make sure that you guys all know that all of the work that is done in the resident's home, and it doesn't have to be their own home, they could rent or own, there's no cost. So that is the LIHEAP program in a nutshell.
And how do you prioritize who gets the help? Because we have more demand than funds. So I know that there's a prioritization. Can you share with the commissioner?
Yeah, so when demand exceeds resources, we have the option to apply a priority points system to sort of screen to make sure that we're addressing the most vulnerable or the most at risk or the most needed residents. And so there are several components of the priority point system. It's energy burden. So we calculate how much gross income, what proportion is spent on their energy usage. We also use actual just your straight up income. So we look at your poverty level. And then we determine whether or not you have somebody who's a member of a vulnerable population. And our vulnerable population is under 5. If there's a resident inside the home under 5, you get points. If there's somebody over 60, you get points. If there's somebody who's disabled, you get points. So all of those sort of those components of categories are all sort of scaled and they're weighted, and then we come up with an aggregate points matrix, and you get a score. And if you are 24 points or above, then you advance to the next stage in the processing, and then you go in the queue for processing. And right now, it's taking anywhere from 3 to 4 months for the weatherization program, and 4 to 8 weeks for the utility assistance program.
Okay, so we'll talk more during your orientation, which we'll talk about in a minute. Thank you, Wayne. We just want to sort of connect the dots. If we're able to help families have more efficiency in their homes, they consume less utilities, which means that it's less burden on their pockets, but it's also less burden on the environment. So we can have triple bottom lines where we save money, where we improve the health of people in a way that is sustainable and that allows them to have a better quality of life. And then we're also contributing to managing our resources better, because when you have a drought, when you have fires, all of this, we all contribute in so many ways. In working with our low-income families to reach those 3 bottom lines is really the goal of our program. So we're always improving, and like Wayne said, we're coming back from the pandemic, and part of that is a lot of opportunity of rethinking how we can improve this program, expand it, but also leverage some of the other work that's happening out there. Some of our from my staff today came into my office, and they were really excited to tell me that IEHC also has some type of weatherization support. So we are trying to reach out to those partners to figure out where can we also leverage some of the work that we do here at CAP. So if you know of anything out there where we can leverage this weatherization program, get in touch with us offline and let's talk. This is what it's all about partnering, thinking of solutions locally, and finding the camaraderie and the support to take on the challenge. Okay, well, thank you, Wayne. The next item is where am I with my screen here? The next item is Mark. So Mark is going to talk about a report that we just submitted called the Organizational Standards Compliance Report.
Thank you. And good evening, Commission and guests. The organizational standards, if you look on the agenda and click on the Organizational Standards Compliance Report, you'll see the sheet that I'm referring to, and our Community Services Block Grant that we receive. It's a federal grant that comes through the state. It comes through an Office of Community Services, which is part of Health and Human Services. Anyway, this department with the Community Services Block Grant Network, the National Community Action, they put together these organizational standards, and then it was memorialized in this IM 138. It was just a memorandum through the Office of Community Services, but basically it's something we have to be in compliance with. And these are organizational standards that ensure that community services block grant entities, or community action agencies mainly, that they have the capacity to deliver the services under the Community Services Block Grant. And these standards mandate good management practices, compliance with the CSBG Act, and the values of community action. Anyway, to summarize that, there are 50 standards that we as a community action agency must meet. And we have to provide documentation for each one of these standards to show that we're meeting it. Well, if you see in the categories there are 3 groups, and maximum feasible participation, that is mainly getting the low-income community involved as much as possible. Vision and direction, you can see under that, it's organizational leadership, board governance, and strategic planning. And then operations and accountability, which will show our effectiveness and efficiency. Anyway, in these areas, if you look at the bottom of the page, we need to be meeting these standards, or else corrective action could be taken in the form of a technical assistance plan, or a quality improvement plan, or reduction or termination even of funding. But the good news is we submitted this report in August, and on September 23rd, we got the notification from the State Department, the California Department of Community Services and Development, that is our not only granting agency from the state for the federal funding, but they are also a monitoring agency on us. And we received 100% compliance acceptance in meeting all of these 50 public public agency organizational standards. So it's something that I want to inform you. We'll go over this more, what these standards are in the orientation, but it's something I just want to let you know, to highlight that yes, we're in compliance, which means not only our funding is secure, but it's the fact that we have a really good relationship as well with our monitoring agency, CSD. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Mark. And not to highlight, but to highlight, Cynthia Moreno from the state actually is here today, just joining us and getting to know our commission. We've been sharing with the state, the exciting news that we're all together now, that we are this commission, and that is one of the most important and crucial standards that we needed to meet. So thank you, Cynthia, for being here in the meeting, and thank you for all of the support that you provide to us, that we are able to be good stewards of the money, but also get more later.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm so glad that that you were able to share with your commissioners that you got 100%. I actually was the person who reviewed it, and it was very well put together. Mark did an excellent job.
Music to our ears. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Mark. And we're going to move forward so we can get you home soon. All right, so we actually have also a very short consent agenda that I'll share with you. Oh, yes. Can you see it? No. Oh, just a second.
We saw it, Carla.
Okay. All right. I'm indifferent. So, so the consent agenda is on your what am I trying to say here? On your agenda. Consent agenda is in the agenda. That's what I meant to say, and it's in the chat. You can click on that link and be able to see the agenda. If you would like to pull any of the items from the agenda for discussion, please do so now. If not, we can go ahead and take a vote on the items that you see in your agenda. So I'll give you a minute to see if you would like to bring anything to the floor. Patty, go ahead. Are you keeping me honest?
I'm sorry to report that we lost quorum at 6:02 when Leslie Altamirano left the Zoom.
Okay. All right. Well, let me then, we will table those for the moment. And what we will do is we will move, and I need to move this, we will move into the next items, which is just an update from me on the reconstitution of the commission. Steph, go ahead.
Carla, I'm sorry. Because we've lost quorum, we're going to have to adjourn the meeting.
Okay. Well, it'll be to be continued. And if I can have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
Could I please, excuse me, have names?
Colleen Watt made a motion to adjourn the meeting.
The second?
Second by Clarissa Cervantes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, our meeting is adjourned. My words is that we will be meeting again November, November, I will tell you now, November 17th. This is, we are really hoping that you can please join us. We cannot go into a quarterly meeting system until we have quorum to be able to update our bylaws. And the bylaws cannot be approved by an executive committee. They have to be approved by the commission at large. So hopefully, if we are all here November 17th, we're going to put this at the top of the agenda now, so that somebody leaves and it'll be among the first things that we do to ensure that we are able to change our bylaws to quarterly meetings. And then just wanted to tell you that we are also incorporating some exemptions to ensure that minority voices are throughout the decision-making process. So those are the updates that you will hear at the next meeting. But for the moment, thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing us quorum and for, at least for the beginning of our meeting. Thank you for your questions and your comments to the presenter. We hope that this was fruitful and informational for you. And then I'm sure all of you will explore the introduction and come back to share maybe more of the information you shared. But for the moment, we got apart. So have a wonderful rest of your week. And we will see you next month. Please make a big effort to be here on the 17th so that we can pass our new bylaws and we can continue moving forward with our commission reconstitution. Thank you.